Hi, welcome to the screencast. Today, we're going to build a workflow in SAP. It gets triggered when an end user updates a purchase order. We are in transaction SWDD, the workflow builder. The process itself is very simple but uses quite a few elements. We have the condition step, a task, then send email functionality, and a process control. The screencast is based on an SDN wiki post, and it's a great place to start. I used it to learn SAP Workflow, and following is the wiki post. It is very detailed and takes you to this through the step, and this screencast follows the steps closely. So let's get started. You're going to create a new workflow. We begin by creating the workflow container objects. I'm going to keep the name the same as the one in the wiki post. I'm going to keep it as close as possible, so you can use both media types as reference. Workflow container is the data area for the workflow. Tasks can exchange data with one another using this workflow container. The second object that we create is it's going to be of type business object type. We have an option to use the ABAP class, but in this case we're going to use the business object type. And the one for purchase order is likely bus 2012 that we search, and we select the purchase order. Now that we are done creating the workflow container, we're going to move to the next step. Let's save it. We're going to go select the local object. Let's go back to the wiki post to see the next step as well as the names that we use in there. So we used creator 14 and bus 2012. Okay, the next step is defining the start condition, and for that we're going to click on the hat. It's the basic data that we define in this step. It's set the status to released. And we're going to define the start events. Now, when triggering a workflow, okay, I think I forgot something. Let me go back to the container, and the two elements that we defined, we want to make sure that it's we check the import box in the properties tab. this is done so that a program that invokes this workflow can pass values for these two elements. So any external program is going to invoke this workflow by triggering the start event, and when doing so, it's going to pass these two parameters as input. Okay, now that we have defined them as import parameters, we're going to again select the business object type here as opposed to the above class. Define the object type, bus 2012. Going to set the event to changed. So the purchase order gets changed. This workflow gets triggered. So we have to at this point set it to active, define the binding and the condition as well. Now whenever a user modifies the purchase order, this workflow is going to get triggered. But we don't want it to be triggered for all purchase orders, so we define the condition in there. Okay, in the binding step, I already went through this process once myself, so I have the binding set between the parameters. We're going to define the condition, and just to make sure, this is one of the few places where our screencast deviates slightly. We're going to select the purchase order, deviate slightly from the details in the wiki post. I'm going to select a purchase order, set the operand to equal to, and go back and select a purchase order that I know I can edit. I pick up the purchase order ID. Okay, select a request. So we have the start event defined. Now if you notice all these buttons are disabled, that's because we are in the step, the event step. We go back to the steps. You can see all the buttons are enabled, and we have defined the start event. Set to changed. So when the purchase order gets changed, the event gets triggered, the workflow starts. Okay, now we're going to double click on this to define a condition. Now, this overall process is to say that if the user who is modifying the workflow, if it's same as the creator, don't do anything else. Create a work item for the original creator. So in this case, we just verify if the person who is modifying it, which is the workflow initiator, is the same as the creator or not. So if it is the same, we say that the creator is back, we don't do anything, else not the same as creator. Okay. So if it's somebody else modifying the purchase order, we are going to do something about it. We're going to notify the creator that, hey, somebody else is modifying your purchase order. Okay, we're going to create a new step. And in this case, we're going to create a task. And define the object type. This is the mapping between the task and the elements in the workflow container. So we have the binding. We're going to assign the agent. You can define your user ID in this case. And here we define that if when the work item is created, if for the next 9 minutes, which is kind of a timeout, the person who has if the creator doesn't look at the email or doesn't do anything, we send a reminder at that point. So we define the activity as well as define the next step, which is send reminder. At this point, we add another step to send email. Someone else is modifying your purchase order. I just put in my user ID in there. Okay, we have another step defined. Now upon sending this reminder email, we are going to create the final step, which is process control. Set the function to complete workflow. So that's the whole workflow for the scenario. So we want to save it and activate it. And now we will be hopping across few other transactions, basically to trigger the workflow as well as, oh yeah, let's switch on the trace. And we're going to look at the trace as well. We're going to go to ME22N to update the purchase order. I'm going to add entry in there and save it. And we see that we have this workflow triggered. If you remember, that was our workflow ID that we created with. I'm going to go into business workplace and see if we got a notification for that's the purchase order that we are working on. So we got an email with a link to the purchase order, and this is how we process the work item. And that completes the screencast.